So this is going to be easily the most difficult video I've recorded so far. In 2013, I went to prison, federal prison, for 3 years, but it cost me probably about a decade of my life, all my 30s. I wanted to make this video because I want to give you a deeper insight into why I think the way I do, why I have the opinions I do, why I see things the way I do. I grew up in church, Apostolic Church in San Diego, California, and I was all in. I was supposed to be a pastor one day and have my own church. I had family members who were part of the clergy in the organization that the church was a part of, because there was it's actually a national organization. And in 2008, 2007, I made a person at my local church, his name is Damien, first clue, that told me about something he was doing with Forex, foreign exchange trading. Kind of like the stock market, but you're trading currency. You make money off of the buy and sell. And so he told me he had gotten with this other person, and they had started the company and were actually doing really well. This other person, his name's Juan. He had traders that would invest people's money and make really good returns. For those of you who don't know, there are different levels. Just like there's different levels of the justice system, there's different levels to the finance world. And most people don't know about the different levels of the finance world. Once you get into millions and even hundreds of millions of dollars, it's a whole different ballgame. It would take a series of other videos to kind of get into that stuff. But anyway, so they were making really good returns, and he said, hey, you know what, you're good at sales. And yeah, I was good at sales. So I was like, okay, well, tell me more about it. I figure I can sell. Let me get to know the product, and then I'll go out and sell it. And in sales, they teach you to go to your sphere of influence, which are your peers, your family. So that's what I did. And they were a little hesitant. So, you keep going, you keep looking for clients. And eventually I started getting people interested in the product. Maybe I'll go into detail on another video as far as how the company worked and what it did. But basically it was offering above average returns or below average risk. And growing up in church, I always felt I was always really ambitious. Like I said, I was an entrepreneur. I was a go-getter. So I always wanted to do great things. And being from church and my family being so involved in church, people would always tell me, oh, you're destined for greatness, and God's got big plans for you. So you kind of believe it, and you fall into that trap thinking that anything good that happens, it comes from God. And just like not everything bad that happens comes from the devil, not everything good that happens comes from God. So okay, started working in that and started going really well. And eventually my family came around. They saw that I was doing really well, and they asked to participate in the program. And I said, of course. I thought, great, this is going to lead to financial freedom and the realization of all our dreams, for me and for my family, my extended family, for everyone involved. So, we moved forward and things were good until 2008. The financial crisis hit. When the real estate bubble burst, all these banks were being closed down, and all these, loan officers and real estate agents were being arrested, some of them basically for selling products that the government had approved. And the Forex market wasn't immune to this. Lost a lot of money. I went from supposedly having a little over $2 million in my account with the company I was working for, not in the regular bank, because they weren't paying nearly as much interest as the people I was working for. So that was like cut in half overnight, and people started panicking. It was kind of like a run on the bank, right? Everybody started asking for their money, and we didn't have it. Now, let me clear up my part in all of this. I ran a feeder fund. I go out and I look for investors. I make the sale per se, drop the contracts and all that, and wire the money to the traders, right? So that they can start working on the money and all that. And the processes back then in 2008, 2007, this actually was, these transactions could take days. It wasn't like now where they're almost pretty much instantaneous. So they could take days, and it was back and forth, and you had to pay fees and things like that. The exchange rates affected. There was a bunch of things involved. So my boss, Damien, told me, you know what, just credit their account and use the money that they deposit for your expenses. Amongst those expenses, of course, were payments to investors, their monthly dividend payments. Now, they say hindsight is 20/20. Red flags now. I'm talking about this and I'm like, how could I have been so stupid? But one, I was inexperienced. I thought it's just another product. I trust these people. They're from church. They're godly people. And I went out there and I sold the heck out of it. And there was a lot of other people that were doing the same thing. But being the consummate entrepreneur that I am, I decided, no, well, I'm going to set up my fund and I'm going to make this bigger and we're going to grow. And I started hiring people to expand the business and diversify and go into other types of investments. And by doing that, in the eyes of the law, I went from a victim to a perpetrator. So anyway, we didn't have the money to pay people when they panicked over the financial crisis. And if you know anything about fractional reserve banking, you would know that no bank has all the money on deposit on hand. It's not a justification. It's just to, clarify that's normal practice. So people started suing, and eventually it came to the SEC's attention and they launched an investigation. And I found out about the investigation one day when I go to use my debit card and it doesn't work. And I know there's funds in the account, or there's supposed to be funds in the account. So I go and I check my account and it's zero. Yeah, my heart just sank. I couldn't understand why that was. I called the bank and they explained it was a court order to freeze the assets of the account. And my heart sank even further. It came out. So I immediately got on the phone and got in touch with the people above me. And they said, oh, no, don't worry. It's all a misunderstanding. We'll clear all this up and we just need to get some funds transferred and we'll liquidate everybody within a week. Well, as you can expect, that week turned into 2 weeks, turned into a month, turned into 2 months. And before you knew it, they stopped taking my calls and pretty much hung me out to dry. So now I have the SEC on my back, and I didn't have any money because they freeze all your assets. I had a little bit of cash put away, but not much. I had no reason to believe anything bad would happen. These were God's blessings upon my life, so I had no reason to keep money aside when all this came crashing down, because I expected it to keep growing and go on for a very, 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 very long time. I mean, I was planning on this, supporting my kids, my grandkids, and my great-grandkids, but that wasn't meant to be. So anyway, I get a summons from the SEC saying that I have to go in for a deposition. And all a deposition is basically the prosecutor having you sit down in front of him, and since you don't know any better and this is a civil case and you don't have any money, so you can't hire a lawyer, you go by yourself, they take advantage of your ignorance and really use everything you say against you. One example was one of the attorneys who said, well, let me go back a little bit. I had always been Joel S. Lay. S is for Soria, which is my mother's maiden name. And from a Mexican background, you use both last names. It was on my ID card. It was on my social security card, Joel S. Lay. So that was my name, right? That's how I signed it. That's how I put it on everything. And the prosecutors investigate and they see that on my birth certificate, it says Joel Lay Jr. There's no S. So then they ask me about that and I explain to them as I just explained to you, and they're just like, oh, okay. So then after the deposition, they file their complaint and they say Mr. Lay admitted to falsifying his name on documents. So after I read that, I said, you know what? I'm going to stop taking their calls. These people, I had nothing to hide. So I was going to go in there, transparency. I want to help them get people's money back, especially since a lot of them are my family. But that wasn't the case. So I looked around trying to get an attorney, and a lot of attorneys offer, I don't know if they still do, but they offer like a 30-minute consultation for free, right? So I spoke to a couple of attorneys and, they kind of made me feel good. They said, well, we're looking at all this and you seem to be like the small fish. We could probably get you off, with a slap on the wrist, but we would need a $100,000 retainer. Mind you, I have no money. Like a couple $1,000s and that's it. I'm trying to sell stuff, literally selling electronics, selling clothes, anything to support myself. Because by this time, here, let me show you. By this time, it was all over local news, right? San Diego Business Journal, regulators charge investment funds with securities fraud. And so it goes into all of that. I mean, if you really care to see, I'll put the link to this article down below. So I couldn't continue living where I was living because I couldn't afford it anymore. So I had to find a smaller place, but nobody would rent to me because of the stuff that was in the paper. So obviously they see something like this and they never return my call. So I was in a pretty bad spot, right? One of the things the attorney did tell me was when I mentioned the civil case, they said, oh, don't worry about the civil case. What you really need to worry about is the criminal case, which is most likely coming down the pipe. And another mini heart attack for me, right? So time goes on and there was me and I believe it was 5 or 6 other people that were like managers that were basically doing the same thing I was, finding investors, and transferring the money and, growing their business. I believe one of them fought it. He, I guess, had, money to fight it. I didn't have any attorney, so I was kind of just like, there's nothing I can do, right? So he fought it, and I think his case went on for a while, 3 years or 4 years, and he was found guilty, and he was sentenced to, I believe, 7 years in prison. And I was living in Mexico at the time because, all the doors were closed to me in my hometown. So I heard about this, and I was like, oh, geez, you know what? And I would come down to visit my family in San Diego, and it was like one of those things where every time I crossed the border, I would think, is this the day? Is this the day that they're going to arrest me? I still figured, you know what? I have faith in the system. It wasn't my intention to defraud anyone, to steal anyone's money. I'm going to plead my case, and they're going to see that I'm a victim as well. So through one of my investors, which did believe in me, I got a hold of the FBI agent's business card, the FBI agent who was in charge of my case. And I called him up and I told him, look, I want to put an end to this. I can't live like this. I wasn't technically on the run because, I was crossing the border freely and nobody was looking for me yet. They hadn't filed yet, 5 years later. And I told him, you know what, I want to get this over with. I want to plead my case. And he says, great. When can you come down? I told him, you know what, I need an attorney though. I'm not going to go if I don't have an attorney. This being a criminal case, they will provide you with an attorney. And I mean, nothing against public defenders. They've got a lot of cases on their plate. So a lot of times they'll just they're there to help you through the system. I don't want to say railroad, but so we show up to the meeting, and my attorney we talk. I meet with him for all of 15 minutes before we go into the meeting, and they come into the meeting, and there's an FBI agent, there's the assistant district attorney, there's an IRS agent, and they basically start saying, okay, well, this is what we got, stating, that you conspired with this person and that person. I'm like, whoa, that's not how this happened. Hold on. I'm trying to make my case, but I would look to my attorney and he would just like look back at me and not give me any input. The assistant district attorney just, laid out everything that I had supposedly done wrong, and I didn't hear a peep out of him. Great guy. I mean, if he ever watches this, I don't mean to disparage you, but I know it's just another case for you, but it was the most difficult time of my life. So I said, no, I didn't do this. I'm going to fight this. And the district attorney smugly said, well, you can do that, but you're going to have the full force and resources of the United States government going against you. What are you going to do? Are you going to say, yeah, let's go, bring it on? What are you going to do? And that's why 95% of cases end up in a plea agreement, because there's no way you can defend yourself. Everybody believes the government for whatever reason. Hopefully not as much nowadays with all the information out there. But I mean, you had people that knew me for a long time, and one article came out and they believed the article over me. Not everyone. And not everyone know who they are, and you'll forever have a place in my heart for believing in me and sticking by me. Sorry, I don't want to get emotional, but yeah, it was a difficult time. So the meeting ended. They said they would, talk to my attorney and let him know what their offer was, because I couldn't do anything. So later my attorney contacted me and he says, oh, you know what? This is the plea agreement they want, and you're looking at anywhere from 1 to 3 years, maximum of 5 years. But they'll probably go with 1 year, first time offender, and you've never been in trouble. You have a lot of people vouching for you, even your victims. So it shouldn't be that bad. Obviously, the hardest thing for me in all of this is not the actual prison time. It's the fact of knowing that I was there for something that I didn't do. It was never my intent to defraud anyone. I thought I was doing good, but apparently intent doesn't matter in the criminal system, which I'll get into in another video. If I got into details, this video would be even longer than it already is going to be. Intent doesn't matter. Doesn't matter what you intended to do. It doesn't affect anything in the least. The judges usually go with the recommendations of the district attorney or whomever the prosecutor is. So I reluctantly agreed. But then later on, I forget what I saw, where it seemed like I could actually even get more time. And I saw that. No, hold on, let me back up. I'm getting a little ahead of myself. So once they told me, okay, you'll probably get like a year and obviously probation, and you're going to have to pay back all sorts of money. I think in all with the civil case and the criminal case, I owe like $50 million, which will take me multiple lifetimes to pay, unless this YouTube thing takes off. You have to go through the motion, right? You have to go into your plea. And that was one of the hardest things I ever did, because the judge will sit there knowing full well how the system works. He'll sit there and he'll ask you how you plead, and you'll say guilty. And he'll say, and you swear that you weren't coerced or pressured into pleading guilty? He knows you were. He knows you were. That's how the plea agreements work. But you have to say, no, I did it under my own free will. You know, I agreed under my own free will and I did do this. You have to actually say you did it, you know, so that they won't drop the hammer on you. So anyway, I get booked and they let me go on my own recognizance. So I don't have to pay bail, I guess is usually what happens in white collar cases. I basically promised that I'm going to show up for my sentencing and they let me go. So now it's 2012, around September, I'm supposed to be sentenced. So I'm thinking Christmas is coming up and I'm thinking I'm never going to see, you know, I'm not going to see my family. All these things are going through my mind and I make one of the biggest mistakes I could have made. I don't show up for court. So I was now a fugitive and I wasn't really hiding. I thought that I have dual citizenship. I'm Mexican and U.S. citizenship. So I thought that my Mexican citizenship would protect me. No. The very long arm of the U.S. government will get you almost anywhere if you're a U.S. citizen. So the Mexican officials arrest me, you know, they hand me off at the border and they take me to jail. And by this point, when I got arrested, I thought my life is over. You know, I'm a fugitive. I didn't show up for sentencing. The judge is going to drop the hammer on me, because if you don't show up for sentencing, basically all the guidelines they have or the maximums that they have for your deal, they're out the window. Now, I mean, they can really throw the book at you. And when I spoke to my legal defender, he told me it could be up to 25 years. 25 years. So I was like, my life is over. My life is over. So what could I do? Basically ask for mercy. I wrote a really long letter to the judge explaining what had happened, why I didn't show up, that I panicked, I was afraid. It was just an emotional decision, a quick decision. And then once it was done, it was done. And luckily, a lot of, like I said, those people that stood behind me wrote to the judge. A lot of them were people that lost money. They wrote to the judge on my behalf. And because of that, I received 3 years. But 5 years had already passed with me living basically like a fugitive, although I was only a fugitive for a few months. But I was outside my home country. I wasn't living the life I wanted to live. So between that and the 3 years I actually did in prison, and the few years after that where you're on probation, you have that stigma. You know, you come out of prison, you want to do things right. You want to get your life together. I want to make all those people whole again, figure out a way to pay back all this money. But you run into walls. They say everybody deserves a second chance. It's not that easy. I'll probably record another video on that. And that's why I went to prison. Basically was charged with running a Ponzi scheme and was locked up for 3 years. And I owe, I think, right around $50 million. Guys, thank you so much for sitting through this. I don't know what's going to happen now that this is out there, but like I said, I wanted to make this video so that you know kind of like the backstory and why I think and see things the way that I do. In future videos, I'll elaborate more and I'll constantly reference this experience while giving you my opinion on life in the world. I've been through a lot, I think maybe a little bit more than the average person, and I'd hate for it to be in vain. I want to use everything I've learned and everything I've experienced to help others and maybe help you see things differently or avoid some of the pitfalls that I've gone through. Thanks again, and I'll see you on the next one.